These babies' bodies are evidence of federal crime, and it is extremely obvious that the DOJ is trying to cover this up.
We're following breaking news out of Washington, D.C. The remains of 5 late-term aborted babies, dubbed the DC-5, will reportedly be destroyed amid calls for an autopsy to determine if the babies were killed in violation of the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act. A secular pro-life group called the Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, or PAAU, claims they obtained the remains from medical waste being disposed of an outside clinic in 2022. Members said they hoped an autopsy by investigators would prove these babies lost their lives through illegal late-term abortions. Some of the members of PAAU were arrested and subsequently incarcerated for blocking access to the clinic back in 2020, before they found the bodies of these children. While those arrests made headlines, nothing happened with the bodies of the DC-5 for almost 2 years. I'm joined now by Caroline Smith, Executive Director of the Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, also known as PAAU. She has the details on the DC-5's whereabouts. Caroline, thanks for being here. Your lawyers told you that they received a communication from the DC Medical Examiner's Office this week. Can you tell us what they relayed?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So on Monday evening, we received word from our attorneys that they had been contacted by the DC Medical Examiner, and that is where the remains of the babies have been for the past 2 years. They were told on Monday that they had received direction from the Department of Justice to dispose of those remains at the end of this week. As soon as we heard this from our attorneys, we jumped into action. We have made a lot of progress in the past 48 hours, but things are still very much up in the air, and there's a lot of work to be done. These babies cannot be destroyed. They are not only human beings who deserve to have a burial and a funeral, but they also are the evidence of federal crimes in Washington, D.C., and very clear that this evidence is trying to be covered.
Yeah, and the medical examiner initially came into possession of these babies' bodies, as you're mentioning, back in 2022. So, Caroline, why is this happening now?
That's a really good question. Obviously, we can't know anything for sure, but it seems very clear to us that the DOJ understands that these are pretty significant evidence of Cesare Santangelo committing federal crimes. And it's very clear to us that they are collaborating with the DOJ, the medical examiner, the police department, the mayor's office, as well as the abortion industry, to do everything they can to protect these late-term abortionists, especially Cesare Santangelo. We are pretty certain it has to do with the upcoming sentencing of the rescuers that you mentioned earlier. Their sentencing is in May.
Yeah.
And these babies provide clear evidence that this abortionist was performing illegal abortions. So, of course, they would do everything they can to try to cover up the evidence.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And your position, Caroline, is that it's crucial that these autopsies happen, given that they could be evidence. Given the DOJ's unwillingness to investigate this matter, going on 2 years now, though, do you think that the man who carried out these abortions, Cesare Santangelo, would ever be held accountable, even if these autopsies do happen?
Well, that's a good question. I believe so. And we are actually calling on Congress to hold congressional hearings for these babies in which they would have to bring the killer in to testify against his actions. We believe that these babies deserve to have a congressional hearing, and that is one of the asks that we are talking to members of Congress today. This is, what issue could be more important right now for the pro-life movement? And so that is what we are aiming for. There are many steps that need to happen right before that and immediately in order for these babies to be preserved. But we are ultimately aiming for congressional hearings for these children to hold their killer accountable.
Yeah, and I know that today you're going onto the Hill to talk to members about this. Can you tell me a little bit more about the reaction, the response that you've gotten from members of Congress based on this latest development that we've heard this week?
Yeah, so we were on the Hill all day yesterday, and we will be all day today as well. We have built together a coalition of pro-life organizations, and we're all going to be going together. We've been going and lobbying to these representatives for almost 2 years now, begging them to do something to understand the importance of this issue. And they understand the importance, but it hasn't been until this week that they've understood the urgency. And I have been encouraged by responses we have gotten. We have gotten many important meetings that we're going to today. And it's been encouraging, the responses we've gotten. However, we need to see follow through, and we need to see immediate and prompt action. Otherwise, what are we going to be able to do? So
Sure.
we have specific asks laid out. It is very possible for these babies to be preserved, for them to be taken out of the hands of the DOJ, and for them to receive congressional hearings. But we need members of Congress to act immediately.
Sure. Real quick, Caroline, before I let you go, how can people help? Real quick, we have about 20 seconds. If someone watching
Please,
this.
yeah, please call and email and tweet your representatives as much as possible. Do not let up the pressure. We need to keep the pressure on until something happens.
Great. Thanks, Caroline. Caroline Smith
Thank you so
of
much.
PAAU. Our sister organization, the Catholic News Agency, has more information on this story. Visit the Catholic News Agency's website to read Joe Bakuris's article.